Did you start to feel like you were literally going crazy?
Yep. Yes, I did. I just kept future tripping onto this cannot possibly be my life. And if I imagine a life like this, I don't want to live it. So my thoughts were very dark. It's still shocking to me what's been possible by going down that path and really having what felt like one of the darkest moments of my life and working through that and seeing what was on the other side.
What's up, friends? Welcome back to The Best Medicine. Listen, if you know me, you know I am the self-proclaimed baby grandma. I take my sleep very seriously, because here's the deal. When you don't sleep well, you don't feel good. And when you don't feel good, you can't do good. And I've realized that if I don't sleep well, I'm not myself. I'm just a hungry butthole. I'm just not a nice person. And especially when it comes to focus and fat loss and ADHD, energy, mental health, happiness, productivity, all of that improves when we sleep well. So I knew that we had to bring on my friend and sleep expert, Mollie McGlocklin. She is the creator of Sleep is a Skill and the host of Sleep is a Skill podcast. We dive into how Mollie cured her insomnia naturally, why great sleep will literally change your entire life, what the best diet is for a good night's sleep, sleep apnea, and Mollie's top supplements. To check out Mollie, head to sleepisaskill.com and check her out on Instagram at Mollie Eastman. And side note, speaking of sleep, if you have not yet tried out our sleepy gummies from Soul, oh baby, you are missing out. They are not only delicious, but they will give you the best night's sleep. You will wake up feeling so refreshed. And what's really cool about our gummies is that you can start with half a dose and only eat half the gummy and then work your way up to a full gummy, and you can see what works best for you. I personally only do half a gummy, and I love the blueberry lemonade. It is chef's kiss, so delicious. So check us out at mysoulcbd.com and check out Mollie at sleepisaskill.com, and let's dive in.
We're starting off with Mollie, and Mollie's very first question when she walked in is about enemas.
Yes, exactly.
I feel like there has to be a correlation between enemas and sleep. We're going to find it. Maybe it helps you to insert
fill in
in
the blank. Yes, exactly. With courage. Yeah.
I mean, everyone thinks it's so weird. And granted, Mike did not have a good experience with a colonic, but enemas are actually much easier and it's much less invasive, actually. And you do it in your house and it's so not weird, but then a colonic is actually more intense. So, later I'll fill you in on it because it's so easy.
Please
It takes
do
5
fill me
seconds
in.
and you just stick some coffee up there and then you just chill. I watch YouTube videos for 12 minutes and then
you're making
go
this
to bed.
very livable, very doable.
Let me tell this colonic story
Would you
really
like to
quick.
interview me now as the enema expert?
We may or may
Let's
not
go.
leave this in. We'll see because
Of course
we
we
want
will.
to talk to Mollie about sleep, but I don't know. Of course, with Angie, somehow coffee enemas and sticking coffee up your butt comes into every single biohacking situation. So let me jump into this story really quick before we get into sleep and everything, because as I mentioned earlier, Angie's obsessed with this kind of stuff. So I was having gut issues. I've obviously had autoimmune things for a long time. So Angie's like, you should go get a colonic.
Yeah.
I'm like, absolutely no.
Yeah.
She's telling me about coffee enemas. Finally, I get convinced that she's like, just go do it. It's not that big of a deal. So I roll up to this place that comes highly recommended. And all I see is a hot dog stand.
Oh, no.
Like a hot dog, maybe not stand, a restaurant or whatever with this awning. And I'm like, Angie, there's no way this can be it. And I walk in and there's some dude there working, behind the counter. And I'm like, hey man, is there a colonic place around here? And it's like Jimmy's Hot Dogs up above.
Oh my God.
And he's like, oh yeah, it's around the back.
Yeah.
It was attached to the same
Puns.
building. Right. And I go in and I did the colonic. I hated it the entire time. I felt awful. I didn't feel better afterwards. I regretted listening to Angie, which is really the moral of this entire story. But my first time, she sent me to a colonic place that's attached to a hot dog.
Maybe you just surrender
Around
more.
back.
Maybe
So I was like,
that was the experience you needed. It's
the
like plant
breakthrough.
medicine. It doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you need.
No,
See,
it
the
didn't give
courage.
me what
Back
I
to
wanted
it.
or needed at all. It was terrible.
Yeah.
Okay, so cautionary tale on the colonic.
Yeah, so
Anyway.
colonics can be a little intense because they're going way up there. It's essentially cleansing your large intestines. But with an enema, it's just the lower area of the sphincter, so it's not as high up.
Yes.
But you're cleansing it, and then any toxins can come out. But yeah, I mean, it's great. You take some binders, you take some magnesium, and then you do it, and it really helps to get out any excess. Like, I mean, sometimes people see worms, which people think is gross, but I think that is great. It's like, oh, you got
gratifying.
something out that was in you. So we'll have to do a whole episode. I can't wait to do a whole episode on enemas and poop and worms, and that one Mike is gonna love.
We should do it live at the hot dog.
If you're an expert in that, listening.
Reunion.
Yeah.
Reunion. But anyways,
It was traumatizing, honestly. But
Oh man,
We are
Leading
here-
with the PTSD. Sorry about that.
I'm really
You want
excited
some of the
to.
chill,
Yeah, I need a lot of that chill. I'm really excited to dive in, and we are super pumped that we can make this happen, Molly, because sleep is probably one of the biggest pain points that people are struggling with. We know with Soul, like sleep gummies is our bestseller. It's the biggest pain point that people talk about. So you are a sleep expert, and we are so excited to kind of dive in.
the sleep shaman.
The sleep shaman.
The sleep
Ooh,
guru.
you should
I
take
try.
that.
I mean,
Yeah.
there we go. We might need to workshop some new branding for me.
The sleep shaman is here today.
I love that.
And
I love that too. All right.
it's interesting because even the title of your company, Sleep is a Skill, is fascinating to me, because I think a lot of people feel really defeated when it comes to sleep.
Yeah.
Like, well, I'm just a poor sleeper. I'm just somebody who can't sleep well, and I'll never be able to sleep well. And I want you to share a little bit about what happened to you, because the first time we met on the East Coast, and we were in a car together, and you were like, dude, I used to have insomnia. And I was like, what the? Because as somebody who loves sleep,
of course.
self-proclaimed baby grandma, I don't know what I would do. I would go
without
crazy.
it. Sure.
And so I'm so intrigued by how you overcame that. And then obviously you realize that sleep is a skill. It's something that we actually have to work on, because it is the foundation of wellness.
Yes. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on here, because the two of you just so much fun, and you came onto our podcast and just so many giggles and laughs, but also value too. It's such an odd, cool dynamic that we don't usually see. So one, just thank you so much for like what you're doing for even the topic of sleep. Really, really, and just, bringing the excitement, but also modeling what it can look like in your day-to-day life. Cause I think a lot of it is, we might learn about it, but actually bringing it in is a big part of it. So, so having said that, yes, I think it's really important to begin with where this all started, which is, for me, it was my rock bottom moment in my life, honestly. But leading up to that, how I related to sleep was that it's this fixed thing. It's always going to be like this. And for me, that looked like I'm a bad sleeper. I'm a short sleeper. I'm a night owl. It's in my genes. Just kind of survive that. That's, my lot. That's, just work on through. So that's always kind of how I related to it. Even when I was little, I'd go to the sleepovers or what have you, and I'd be the last one to fall asleep, and just sort of really struggling in that area. And then flash forward into, kind of college years and what have you. It just got more and more solidified, that kind of story. And it wasn't until, this was living in Manhattan, serial entrepreneur, burning the candle at both ends. It wasn't until then I decided to take my business on the road with my now husband, who which feels so weird, an adult to say husband. But anyway, this just happened a couple weeks ago. Yeah. So very nice.
Shit's real.
Yeah, shit's real. Exactly.
Can't go back now, Molly.
I know.
Just kidding. We love you, Blake.
Exactly. Shut up, Blake. Yeah. And so we decided, as two wild, self-proclaimed night owls, and these entrepreneurs that were just stressed to the max, let's take our business on the road, bring more instability to already unstable lifestyle. And then what really happened for me in that period was just this real breakdown that looked like insomnia, looked like not being able to sleep night after night. Wow. And it really was such a scary time in my life, because I was, where my brain went was, is it always going to be like this? Am I now going to be dependent on taking like sleeping pills for the rest of my life? And also part of what was in the background for me is that my family had a lot of history with pharmaceutical use, and I saw those paths and what those looked like. And so that was very particularly scary for me, of saying, okay, here we go. This is the lot that I now have. So that really created that fire underneath me to figure this out. And at its lowest point, I went to the doctors in Croatia with Google Translate and said, help, I can't sleep, and left with their version of Ambien. And in that moment, it was like, all right, I got to really take this on, because at least with the the stops that I was making along the way with the certain doctors that I happened to fall in line with, that it was more of a pill related solution.
Yeah.
You know, and so from that place, the onus went on to, I need to really work this out.
What pills did you take?
So
I'm curious what you were
during
on.
this, I took all in pretty much the benzo hypnotic family. So began with the Ambien, then because we were, you know, this digital nomad life that we were trying to start that at the time didn't work out at all. That was in Croatia. Then we went to Budapest, and that's where they gave me Xanax. Another spot gave me Valium, like really old
So
school.
you were just on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
so what they did was they tried to make it, to their credit, tried to make it short term, which is really what the approved use of these drugs at this point in time is, for short-term use. And so they tried to do short-term use to a certain extent. And so I'd have like a couple weeks, and then it would be the Xanax, the Valium, but then other doctors say, oh, take both of them. And, you know, all of this.
Mix them, see what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Bye. No, just kidding. But,
Did
know.
you start to feel like you were going crazy? Because
Yes.
I've only taken
Yes.
strong sleep medication once or twice in my life, and it was terrifying because I was starting to see things and hallucinate. It was really scary because for me, my body's very sensitive.
Same.
So for me to take something like that, it was a scary experience.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, did you start to kind of feel like you were going crazy with those meds? And then if they're not working, and you know, a lot of times lack of sleep is used as torture in some situations in certain
That's what it felt like. I mean,
countries and stuff, right? They literally have people not sleep. It is a form of torture. So it's almost like, did you start to feel like you were literally going crazy?
Yep. Yes, I did.
Wow.
And so out of that, it was very concerning for me, because then I just kept future tripping onto, this cannot possibly be my life. And if I imagine a life like this, I don't want to live it. Like, so my thoughts were very like dark.
So
really
you were getting
dark.
depressed.
Oh, huge.
Yeah.
And so what I really got out of that experience is what it looks like to have a life where sleep is not that kind of respite for you. You know, there's just such value in going to bed, waking up the next day with a sense of you had a bit of a reprieve from whatever you're dealing with before to the next day. Yeah. So for me, you know, squeezing out maybe an hour or two, whatever it looked like, it didn't have that sentiment to it. Yeah. And that was a really, really big struggle. And absolutely, you feel like you're just losing it. Yeah. So what ended up happening was we were there overseas for 3 months, and then came back because of my sleep to really just get to the bottom of what was going on. So I ended up seeing a ton of doctors in the US. I did have some weird things. I had parasite and a couple other things that were going on. Yeah. But, you know, a lot of that had to go through a behavioral shift, identity shift, psychological shifts, a number of things. So what actually occurred out of all of this was, once I started stabilizing my sleep, and, you know, as I shared, it wasn't that great before. So getting it even to that original homeostasis was sort of meh. But then being able to get to this conversation of optimization was like a whole, I didn't even think that was available to me. I thought that was just like back to the survival mode. So once that started happening, I could not stop talking about it. I just was so empowered, and like, you know, just a sense of relief that this had happened. So I started speaking with people just organically, then started creating these, you know, small groups and, you know, one-on-ones. And now on the other side of it, we have Number 2 Sleep Podcast. You know, there's not a lot of sleep podcasts, but Number 2 Sleep Podcast, you know, we're in hotels. We work with high stakes poker players, UFC fighters, you know, all kinds of things and I say all this because it's still shocking to me what's been possible by going down that path and really having what felt like one of the darkest moments of my life and working through that and seeing what was on the other side. Wow. And so rewarding for myself I continue to like, I want to know all the latest and greatest around sleep optimization, but also to bring that to the masses. I just think it's such an important topic, like the foundational piece.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what you're doing is arguably one of the most important things that we'll ever do in our life. I mean, think how much time we spend sleeping. We all sleep every single day, and it's so overlooked, and most people don't take it seriously. And it's interesting because I'm very sleep sensitive. I've always been. I remember in high school telling my mom, I don't want to go to the parties. And she'd be like, why not go out? Our mom's really cool. She'd be like, you should go. I'm like, Mom, really it's 9:30. Yeah. If I don't go to bed soon, I'm going to wake up tomorrow feeling like shit. Like, I've always been
very cool. Very
weird like
impressive.
that.
Yeah.
I just always knew that my body needed a lot of sleep. And so it is interesting that when I don't get good sleep, I wake up and I think of the people out there who, if they improved their sleep, their happiness and their mood and their ability to focus would be so much better.
Yeah.
And they don't realize what's happening is their lack of sleep. So what you're doing is so important, right? Like that one small tweak of fixing their sleep a little bit could make a lot of people way happier humans, right? Like think of the days where you get shitty sleep. You wake up depressed, feeling like shit. You're hungry. Your blood sugar's off. Your hormones are wonky. You're aging faster. Like nothing good happens when we don't sleep.
Nothing. Yeah.
So like, listen, I want to be happy and not age poorly and have energy. I want all those things. So to me, it's like, I'm always thinking about what can I do to sleep well tonight?
Yes.
And that's where the baby grandma brand came from.
I mean, that's because I feel like the baby grandma piece is so good. I feel we'll have to do something with that because it's just make that a huge movement. Because imagine there's one of the things we do in one of our courses is talk about kind of sleep leadership.
Ooh.
Because a lot of what we need to do.
I'll sign up for that.
Right? I know.
The leader of the sleep movement.
Or maybe you can help make it more fun marketing. But we'll bring in the fun and the bells and the whistles of baby grandma or what have you. But how can we, because sometimes we can learn all these things, but if we can't have the gumption to be the ones to say, yes, I'm going to go to the party and leave at 9:30 or whatever it is to work in with your schedule, and actually feel great about that and how to have it all and how to both be social or, do things that are important to you, but then also mind those priorities. I mean, you are kind of exhibiting what that can look like.
So there's probably a lot of people, there's millions of people that are on Ambien and having trouble with sleep. Like just to kind of start in terms of like quick hacks or like easy, and then we can dive into like everything from easy hacks all the way down to like the Dave Asprey biohacking, like crazy stuff. But if I'm someone who's taking Ambien or really struggling sleeping and not getting enough sleep, similar to like yourself, what do I do? It feels like such a daunting thing. And there's you've got the Oura Ring, you've got blue light blockers, you've got all this stuff. But like, are there some quick, easy steps that you always steer people to start their journey?
Yes. Yeah. Really important. And one, though, these drugs that we're talking about, if we're discussing, benzos, hypnotics, really, really important to work with someone because they can have such difficulty if you are if you're listening and you're in this conversation of saying, okay, I really want to explore. I know some of the deleterious effects of being on these, and, just to even quickly run through some of those, we're concerned about long-term use of those over time, particularly, for many reasons, but as it relates to sleep, then shifting the architecture of our sleep in such a way that we're having this kind of sedation effect versus actual real sleep. So while it might help with the sleep onset piece, what is the quality of that sleep looking like? Is it even really extending the quantity if that's part of your game? Then it doesn't appear that it's really doing a lot of those things, and certainly not approved for long-term use is what's written, kind of the written up, but then what we see in practicality is people being on these for years and years and years. So
let me ask you real quick though, because I was going to, not sorry to interrupt, I was going to say it's recommended to be short-term use, right?
Yeah.
But then I'm confused, what is the underlying mechanism that's solving? Because what are they hoping, let's say, when you say short-term, maybe 3 months possibly. So let's say after those 3 months, what are they hoping that these meds are going to do so that all of a sudden it's like, oh, month 3, month 4, I'm off them and everything's good. That's where I'm a little bit confused.
Yeah, 100%. So the thinking is that this would be addressing some acute issues in our lives. Something is really not working. We've had a death in the family. That's one of the reasons, presumably, that I was given some of those scripts for, jet lag or certain things that you're trying to manage in a short-term way. But we know that some of the effects of these over the long term kind of have a compounding effect and a lot of difficulty of getting off of these. Yeah. So to really answer your question, it's addressing something that might be acute and then putting the systems in place and just getting you that sleep you need during that period, and then over time being able to find a long-term solution that's not in that family. And granted, there are many different prescription drugs that are on the market that might not fall into those, but those are some of the most meaningful or most important for us to address because they are very, very addictive and concerning as far as what that looks like for sleep. So a couple steps that people could take. One, we just had an awesome podcast with Dr. Anna Lemke. So she was on the Andrew Huberman podcast, and she's so she wrote Dopamine Nation, drug dealer MD, really respected professor out of Stanford, and what's really interesting about her work is she's calling it the hidden epidemic is these benzodiazepines. And she's really trying to sound the alarm in the same way we're sounding the alarm for opioid use. Then these drugs, because so many people are on these and we're not aware of just the huge effects that happen with these. So one, she's a fantastic resource, got some great books there, the podcast there. Also, there's an organization, the Benzo organization, and they have a lot of resources and kind of specialists that you can kind of get in touch with so that you're ensured that you're being taken care of as you're embarking on that weaning process. Because depending on the dosage, it can be really, really so I don't mean to say it like that, because you can always set up something, you can make it workable and for whatever works for you, but you definitely would like to ensure that you have support along the way. One of the things that they often have as a resource is the Ashton manual, and that's a manual that kind of helps set up a tapering process for you and to work with a professional on that.
Yeah. That's really smart. I know personally with painkillers too, that is very difficult to wean off of it. And you end up taking one step forward, two steps back. So thank you for those resources.
Yeah, of course.
How many people do you think are walking around who have high functioning, I don't even know if I want to use the word depression, because I do want to give that word the merit that it deserves when somebody truly is experiencing that, but just feeling melancholy, or they have ADHD, which I have, I guess you could say. It was proven on a brain scan, but these things of I can't focus, I don't feel good, I'm not really happy. And how many people do you think are walking around and that the culprit is that they're not sleeping well at all, and they haven't first addressed, am I even sleeping well? Is my body even repairing enough to function at its optimal the next day? I always think about that. Like I think of people who are kind of just at good, and if they slept great, they could be at great, right? It's 100%. Like a lot of people ask me about my energy. I've always been asked about my energy. I sleep 9 hours every single night, and I've always slept a lot, and I don't feel any shame around that, because I think if I'm going to be this high energy person, I need to plug in my phone. I have to recharge this hyper machine. And so I also encourage moms listening too, who have children who are hyper or hyperactive, let them sleep a lot, because they're usually really active children too. So if they're going to run around all day and jump off trees and lick trees and be crazy, which is what I did when I was little, like let them sleep. And I think we're so afraid to let people sleep more than 6 hours, right? So I'm curious your thoughts on, one, how many times do you encounter or think that people could be even happier if they slept better? And then also your thoughts on length of sleep.
Yeah.
Like, is that weird that I sleep 9 hours?
Yeah.
Is that too long? I don't know.
Yeah. No, so good. So one, I love what you're saying too, because I think that's what is exciting about coming at it from a skill set, because no matter where we're at with our sleep, I mean, the statement that I would definitely want to make sure I leave everyone with is that no matter where you're at with your sleep, there's things that we can do to up level that in a particular way, and hopefully bringing like fun and excitement and curiosity and intrigue from a perspective of, in order to improve your sleep, you're improving your life. So really we're looking at, I like to think of sleep as the barometer of the workability of your life. So if your sleep is not working, your life is likely not working in some way, shape, or form. And what I mean by that is that the things that we do to improve our sleep really happen from the moment we first wake up throughout the whole course of the day, because our daytime activities are really a mirror of then how you're, so the experience of your days is really that mirror into the night. So if you're stressed and anxious, right, during your day, we'll see that show up in your night. We'll see that show up in heart rate, in your temperature, in your HRV, heart rate variability, respiratory rate, a number of other things. So for instance, like I had a client that single elderly woman has this dog. It was like her, fur baby, the whole thing, and the dog passes away. And the difference that we could see in her sleep was just so profound from the grief and from the upset there. And so dealing with that throughout the course of the day, I don't know why it's top of mind, but one example of how what is happening for us in our life shows up in those evenings. So that's just one piece of it that I think all of us can really up level this skill and make it fun, because then this is improving our whole life and our coping mechanisms and other things, and exercise and how we're eating and all that. But then I think to also further underscore your question of like how many of us, I really have an experience that the majority of other people that I see, and granted, there are interesting stats around what's postulated of the number of people that might have sleep apnea, and looking at anywhere from a third of us, and the numbers range based on how we're quantifying this, but things like that, sleep apnea rates, mouth breathing, all of these things that might even be from an anatomical perspective. There are so many of these present that I think that the majority of us could do something today to improve our sleep. Yeah. And to answer your other question too about okay, how this affects so many of these other parts of our life, the experience of our life, how we, our cognition, ADHD, just our generalized mood, depression. Yes. Like we struggle to find a single area of life that is not impacted when sleep is not
I can't
working.
think of one.
No.
And it's funny because people say, sleep when you're dead. Remember that was like the old meme?
Listen.
Sleep when you're dead. Keep
all
working.
the things. I was the worst. I was like, I get my best work done at 2 a.m. and just crazy things. And would glorify this evening rogue artistic night owl. All the thing, right? Nonsense.
And now you're you've got your mouth tape on.
Mouth tape.
You're blocking glasses, and Blake's like, I made a huge mistake.
No, I was thinking when you say that,
looking so sexy.
That amazing catfish reel you had done, which is that's so me. Oh my god, yes.
Your red lights on. You're just like, good night. And before
can we go back to that wild child woman? Yeah.
And before you're up at night playing music, typing, I'm so creative. I'm such a creative. And now you're
accurate. Yes.
But you know what? You have great energy, brain clarity. You're doing great. So obviously you are feeling way better,
and he feels like that now too. It's still so shocking because both of us used to, act like this, and we were in this echo chamber of this is the way.
Wow.
And so now to be on the other side of that, and I think that's really, there's exciting studies now too that are coming out in really solid journals that are looking at how can you, from even these extreme night owls, which is what we were, and that's our behaviors were indicative of that, and being able to move themselves to an earlier schedule. And I'm not saying, I don't want to confuse anyone listening saying that we're villainizing if you are on the later side of that spectrum, but I think what I did was I took that label of night owl and ran with it and made it so extreme, and then would do all these things to further just underscore that. And then I would be going to bed so egregiously late. Yeah. And really what we're finding is there might be a spectrum of what time people are more inclined to go to sleep, a little bit more early birds, a little bit more night owls, but certainly not to the extreme spectrum that many of us, I think, now think is normalized. And then doing all these things that further add fuel to the fire to make that even more extreme.
So what are some of the things you can do in the morning? That's a really interesting point that you made about the fact that you don't think about things right when you first wake up impact your sleep later on that night. But what are some easy steps that people should start doing?
Sun, food. Let's get into
let's get into the good. Okay, yeah. So we definitely want to make this practical. So I hope that if anyone listening, if they're saying, okay, so what do I do? Fine. I'm clear. I need to prioritize my sleep. So from circadian biology and from chronobiology, what we know is that there are a couple really big, heavy moving, levers that will impact your results with really resetting your master clock. So the biggest one is light. So that's why we talk about morning sunlight being so important. So what I mean by that is morning sunlight exposure and getting that into your eyes every single morning. And depending on, and getting really curious about this one, because
immediately when someone jumps out of bed.
So, good question. So we ideally would like this to be within around 30 to 60 minutes upon rising. Okay. Really, the earlier, the better. So what Blake and I do is no matter where we are on the globe, we really aim to have this morning walk. Sometimes longer, sometimes it's shorter. Sometimes it's more really just getting outside the terrace, you're just kind of hanging out there and just getting that light or what have you.
Just 5-10 minutes of even just looking at it.
Even that. So there is kind of an equalizing effect. If usually you're doing your certain amount, say hopefully more in the 20-minute, 30-minute range, the walk or the run or whatever can be great if so. But even if you're just getting yourself out there, and then sometimes it's got to be a little bit shorter, that can be workable. But we want to make this a routine thing, and you want that clear set time, the clear consistent wake up time, 'Cause some people hear this and say, oh, okay, fine, I'll do that. And 5 days a week, I wake up at that one time. And then the weekends, it's like 3 hours later. That's fine. Well, what we find is that can create kind of what's called social jet lag. So you didn't go anywhere, but you're giving yourself the experience of jet lag. So we want that consistent wake up time 7 days a week. And then marrying that wake up time with that sunlight exposure. And so you're getting yourself outside for a particular period of time. If anyone's listening and they're saying, well, that doesn't apply to me because I'm up in Toronto. And so a big part of the year, it's freezing cold. The sun's not as powerful. So I hope if you're listening, then we actually want to double down on the amount of time that we're outside to make up for that. So on those cloudy days, then you just expand the amount of time that you're getting that exposure. And then there are some little hacks, things like the Spurdy lamp. I have no affiliation with them, but there are some a company that is one of the only lamps that is approved by the FDA to generate vitamin D from a lamp.
Wow.
So some people can get it covered by their insurance for if they have skin disorders or seasonal affective disorder or what have you, which I'd really make the argument that many of us, if we don't prioritize this and get these steps in order, we all have some version of seasonal affective disorder, if left to its own devices. So that one would be the first one that we begin with.
Wow. Okay. It's interesting because most people, and I'm not perfect with this, I'm trying to get better, but most people wake up and they look at their devices and they're looking at blue light and they're in a room with artificial light and they don't see natural sunlight. So the body is confused. It's like, okay, we know it's day, but then we're in this artificial light and we're looking at screens. And I'm pretty religious about this. I wake up and I immediately try to get outside and go on a walk or see the sun. I actually don't like going to the gym right away in the morning now. I do my workouts in the middle of the day because I notice if I go into the artificial light there, it messes with my energy and my sleep that night. So it is so connected,
100%.
Right? It's crazy how connected it is. And I think it will drive Mike crazy sometimes because one, at night, he likes bright lights. Like we'll be in the kitchen at night if he's visiting and I'm like, no, we got to put the salt lamps on. We're going to mess up our circadian rhythm. And in the morning, him and Clay, being men, this is proven scientifically, they wake up and want to hunt. They literally want to work and like purpose, and I'm like, I need to see the sun to like heal my hormones first, So it's funny because they like go to their computers right away and like they're in that world. And I'm like, no, you got to go outside at least for a little bit. So I know it's hard for people listening who start work right away when you get up, but maybe that's setting their alarm a little bit earlier, or I don't know, just standing in their backyard and grounding for at least 10 minutes before they get in their car to go to the office or whatever. How could somebody do this who's like, dude, work starts at 9. I wake up at 7:30. I don't have time to like butt sun outside. What are my options? Because I don't want them to go into fluorescent lights in an office because now their body is like, dun, dun, dun. And no wonder their energy sucks. So it's like, what do we do?
I really appreciate you saying that because it's like, it's a nice lofty idea, but we got like real life and how do we work that in? So a couple things. So one, if you can stack other things that you need to get done and have those happen outside. So for some people,
walking your dog while butt sunning.
Yes, exactly. Well, the dog walking is like those people really went out because they learn, okay, rain or shine, I'm getting out there. But so if you can stack those things, so if you can do, calls, podcasts, like, kind of you're setting up for the day, and I hope that I'm not making this sound too like a lofty goal, because even if you're starting with a few minutes to begin with from a behavioral change perspective, we can always kind of, up level that down the road. Other things you can do is if you are going straight kind of from, bedroom to the car or what have you to drive to the job, even rolling down the window changes the physics of that light that you're being exposed to. Because if anyone's listening and say, oh, that's not me because I sit in front of a big window, so I'm good. Well, in certain studies, we find that it takes anywhere from 50 to 100 times longer to reset that master clock from behind a window than it does from just getting ourselves physically outside, because it kind of it messes with the quality of the light that you're getting in through that. And so takes away from some of the important benefits of being out in that light. So, cracking that window can be another little workaround. I've also had clients that, so funny because they'll wear, say, like the Oura Ring or other wearables. And so we can see their activity load. And so they'll have little shots of kind of sun breaks that they'll take throughout the course of the day. And so even to the point of just like going out in the parking lot and they'll kind of like walk around or what have you. So any way that you can get kind of creative with this, then Ensuring though that with all of this that you're minding this thing called sunlight anchoring, really coined more by professor out of Stanford called Dr. Dan Party. So with him, it really ensuring that we're having this sunlight anchoring, super important, because then that resets that master clock every single day. So abiding by that. And then what you said about, for Mike or Clay or what have you that are just like, yeah, turn on the lights, whatever.
Just kill him, right? Okay. Okay. All right. I'll do that later tonight.
Oh my God, I'm going back to all your reels with like the killing Clay one.
Oh yeah, when I killed Clay, yeah.
I'm such an Angie reel lover. That's so good.
Well, it's crazy. He puts artificial light on at night, and I'm like so sensitive to it. I'm like, I can't.
Yeah, but I mean, what do you suggest I do though? Like if I'm someone, I need to work after the sun comes down
lamps.
and I enjoy it.
Yes.
Like I want to build my business. There's things I want to see. And obviously being in bed and having the screen in front of me, we know the blue light's not good, but blue light blocking glasses, like what are some steps at night to start to get into that proper like circadian rhythm?
Okay, so because 100%. A couple of things. One, the amount of blue light and for hopefully full spectrum light, which is the sun, but also including blue light because we don't want to villainize it because during the day it's really important for energy and doing all the things. So having that full spectrum light during the day, the more of that you get, the less sensitive to it that you'll be in the evening, because over the course of the day, your eyes change by virtue of just kind of being awake, and they are all on a circadian clock, because every cell in our body has these little clocks. So the whole body and the organs are on different clocks than the eyes, than this. It's a really interesting kind of dance of these clocks, right? Mm-hmm. So if you get enough, a high amplitude of full spectrum light throughout the course of the day, you're a little less sensitive during the evening. So you can think of it almost as say you spend a full day at the beach and you know how like bright that is and what have you. And then later on when you come in, it seems so dim, like the same lights that used to feel bright on, our standard type of day seem really like much more dim. It's because of that amplitude. So ideally you're getting the max amount of sun and that will help kind of support you so that it's not as much of a hit. But then to your question about like, well, how can we hack it? Ideally you do want to do. We had a anthropologist on the podcast that called it the candlelight challenge. So taking the candlelight challenge, that post sunset, you would use nothing but candlelight in the evening.
Romantic.
Yes, romantic, exactly.
Yeah.
And what would that do to your sleep? Now, he always would find that like no one would do this. So he would, mentally.
He's like, one girl in Austin, Texas took the challenge.
She's like hardcore.
No one else.
Cathedral of candle. Yeah.
Start the house on fire.
Yeah.
And also to anyone listening, they're like, okay, I got kids, I got dogs, we can't have candles everywhere. Yeah. So to take, the essence of that. So even if you post sunset, you have the Himalayan salt lamps.
Those are the best.
Yes, right. You have the red lights or the Philip Hues or, really amber. That would be great. Also for like the work that you're speaking to. Iris Tech is one that we really like that can go totally red, so that when you are using it, it's not impacting your melatonin production.
Iris Tech.
Yeah.
Is that a software?
Yeah, software.
Okay,
it's
so
kind
you
of
put it
akin
on your
to
computer or phone and then it'll dim the blue light.
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
So that's great on laptops because it's kind of like Flux is.
I have
and Flux can be another great option.
Okay.
Iris
FLUX,
is just
yeah.
Yep. And Iris is great just because it will go super red. So it'll be glowing red. And so probably you've seen this on your phone, I'm assuming, right? So you can
seen that setting.
Kind of triple click, right? And then it turns like
it's interesting.
Red,
I
right?
actually have, when I triple click on my phone, it turns black and white.
Oh, so you have the grayscale one.
Is that also good? Is that helping with blue light?
So that is helpful from a kind of excitatory perspective. So you're not getting all of those extra colors at the wrong time.
The dopamine.
And the dopamine and like,
That's
so
good to know.
It's likely less addictive as well as what most people see. It's like, oh, this is like suddenly less fun. Why? But then I would say the next step up would be the red, just because still the black and white can give you, more of that blue and green light.
Okay.
So from that part of the spectrum, and those are the parts of the spectrum that are more disruptive to melatonin.
Yeah. So blue light blocking glasses then.
Yes.
I'm fascinated by these because there's a million different types.
I know.
There's ones that like Dave Asprey wears that are so orange that like they look ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then there's ones that are clear on Amazon. And you've got ones that are $150 to $10. I don't know if you're associated with one or whatnot, but that makes me think that they do work, if they're the right ones, if we're using the same type of application with our screens, right? So what are your
Yes.
thoughts on blue light blocking glasses?
Yeah, so they can be really, really great as a kind of support. Ideally,
Okay.
so I think people can get a little funky with them and assume that they don't need to do anything else and just throw those on, right? And it's still like as bright as Target or something in their place. And then they've got those on because it's still accessing and all these other elements. And then there's still a lot of questions around, are there other kind of photosensitive elements of our body that might be picking up on that? But certainly we know for the eyes alone.
Blue light blocking suit. We need to invent.
Yeah.
We're going to be
And there's a lot of controversy on that part because there was a study that had originally made it kind of the takeaway was that we have this photosensitivity in our skin, but then that study has since been sort of questioned. So it's still a little gray area for the rest of the body, but certainly the eyes. And so that can be super helpful. So I definitely suggest having those on hand. I have tons of these blue blocking glasses, as cheap as, the Amazon ones and to the really expensive ones. But a couple things to be aware of. The clear is not sufficient for the evening. I know a lot of people will say, but unfortunately those do not do the trick. I wish they would. They're much cuter. But you really have to have it orange or red. And then to your question of like, but some are so dark. What does this look like? So really, if you are using some of those clear ones, there might be some validity to using that during the course of the day, really sensitive or on the computer all the time, eye strain, headaches, all that. But then what I'm particularly concerned about is the evening. So post sunset, then moving into those kind of more orangey amber color. Yeah. And then what I more see workable for people is then in that, say like 90 minutes to an hour before bed, if you want to get really biohackery, then you can bring in the red lenses. So the difference for that is that the reds they are cutting that fully, that blue and the green that we spoke to.
Okay.
So and the whole reason we're doing this is really to help intrinsically produce enough melatonin and not suppress the amount of melatonin. Melatonin is known as the hormone of darkness. The vampire hormone is another name for this. And the reason it's called that is because it requires to have full production and sufficient production to not only have you fall asleep, but also stay asleep. And also melatonin is it's not as if it's like an Ambien. It prepares you for sleep. It lowers your, helps to support all the steps that come along with it, the lowering of heart rate and body temperature and other things. Yeah. But if you are being doused in all this sunlight, or not even sunlight, but blue light, fake light, then from that place that is impeding our ability to make enough natural melatonin. So you can wear those blue light blocking glasses. There's even, if you want to get really nuts, there's things like drift TV that will cut some of the blue in the TV, or just kind of ensure that the TV element, what you're watching, isn't too excitatory. But that can also, for some people, be calming and like a nice ritual, depending on the content of it. Yeah. But then ensuring that the rest of your space, and even those like kind of things that you wouldn't necessarily think of, you open up the refrigerator and it's like all that bright light. Yeah. You go into the bathroom for it's a quick bathroom run, but all of those hits can then be difficult for the our goals that we're trying to have, which is that uptick in melatonin.
You talked earlier about time, or how much you sleep versus quality of sleep. I think that's really important, because my first question was, well, how do I know if I'm getting good sleep?
Yes.
Right? Because there's probably a lot of people that are getting 8+ hours, but maybe it's really shit sleep. So
I'm glad you said that, because I didn't officially answer your
and
question
I've heard
about
women need more. I've heard women need more sleep than men too.
Yeah. So and this is a super interesting conversation. So one, because I know you also said, I sleep 9 hours. Like, is that great? What are we thinking about with that? So a big study that came out fairly recently, the kind of takeaway with this was this U-shape result for the quality of sleep and then longevity and other markers of health. So the takeaway there was finding that 7 to 9 hours being part of that kind of U shape. And then when we start going much less than that 7, then things starting to kind of amplify of kind of poor results. But then also, importantly enough, then if we go into more like hypersomnia, where we're sleeping a lot, right, like 10, 11 hours, what is that all about? And finding that might not be the positive thing either out of those results. So I would say a couple of things. One, we want to do all of these things that are behavioral in nature and really get these these elements align for health in our sleep, because so many people are having this roller coaster effect. And that's what I see most people come through, because we have everyone wearing different wearables. So I see often years of data and just a lot of habits that we get into that we might not realize aren't working for us or whatever. So what that will look like is they might sleep 7 hours during the work week. And then on the weekends, then it's suddenly they're getting their 9 hours or what have you, and trying to kind of make up for that. And that impacts the quality of that sleep that they're getting throughout the rest of the week, and is impacting the quality of that sleep, even on the long sleep. So with this, I think it's challenging to be clear on how much sleep we need until we're putting in these steps from the get-go. And there's more things we can talk about too that are helpful for people to start bringing in to get that quality sleep.
What about these psychopaths who sleep only like a few hours a night and they're fine, and they're doctors and they're surgeons and they're like I'm fine.
Yeah.
Are they running on adrenaline and cortisol? Have you heard of these people?
Yes.
I mean, there's people out there who claim that they just don't need a lot. I mean, even Clay is like, he needs like 6. He gets up at like 4:30 a.m. It's still dark out when he gets up. And I'm like, you're psycho. It's dark. That is literally the sign of do not get up yet. It's dark. It's dark out. And he's like on his laptop. He loves it. He loves the working hours of like 4:30 to 7. He just like goes ham.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's fine. It works for him. It's great. But I don't wake up till 7:30 or 8. So it's so funny that he's lived so much life in the dark before I even get up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is he crazy? And then you hear about these people who can survive on minimal hours.
Yeah.
Like surgeons. And you think there's some people that are just born with a little bit of a different gene or something that allows them to function on such little sleep?
Yeah. Well, and there definitely is that variability of the sleep need that certain people have versus other people, and also falling into categories of their age and other factors, how much they're exerting themselves throughout the course of the day. You often hear reports of athletes that need the 9 hours, the 10 hours, whatever. And so there's a lot of factors that go into it. But I was just at a conference just this past week, and Dr. Michael Bruce was there, the sleep doctor, and was really sharing, listen, I get 6 hours and change of sleep every single day, and I'm, America's sleep doctor. Kind of just in saying that from a perspective of you want to do your work to discover what that is for you, and also seeing how often as we do age, there does seem to be a tendency where we are sleeping a bit less over time. So depending on which group you're in, and I'm talking to adults, but there's also for teenagers, they tend to sleep have a much higher, longer sleep need. So it is layered for that piece. But to answer your question, I think there's a big concern for people that will often be used to a particular way of sleep. I used to be one of those people too. I'm like, I can get by on just a little bit of sleep, and not realizing, not connecting the dots with, I'm getting more and more anxious. I'm getting sick more and more often, because I didn't mention that in the lead up to my sleep issues, I had the beginnings of an ulcer. I got shingles like in my 20s, like all these signs that you should probably not, something's not working. And I think that's one of the things, and it brings it back to what you said, like really connecting those dots about ADHD, our mood, our effectiveness throughout the course of the day. I think that this is the forgotten element. So I would make the argument that they've just gotten used to life looking like that.
Wow.
And I'm saying that for when we're talking about the very short sleepers, the 3 hours of 4 hours. Yes, is there this call out of kind of short sleeping gene, but it seems to be very, very small. So it's highly unlikely that anyone listening is dealing with that.
Hey guys, it's Mike here. As many of you know, sleep is one of the most overlooked yet important factors in our health and recovery. If you've been dealing with difficulty falling asleep and waking up tired and groggy after binging Game of Thrones or Love is Blind all night because you can't sleep, I've got you. We developed an incredibly tasty sleepy gummy line that has some amazing all-natural powerhouse ingredients in it. Now, some of the ingredients in the gummy are organically grown CBD and CBN. CBN, known as cannabinol, is a compound extracted from hemp that's non-psychoactive. Don't worry, Mom, it won't get you high. But it contains powerful, relaxing properties known to improve the quality of REM sleep, and we all need more of that. We've also got myrcene in there. It's a natural compound found in plants that promotes a calming, sedative effect to help you fall asleep faster. And we've also got melatonin, another natural occurring hormone that regulates the sleep-wake cycle, helps you fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer. So these are just a few of the ingredients packed in this gummy, but trust me, this is our best-selling product for a reason, guys. I can't tell you how many people come up to me or DM me telling me about how Sleepy changed their life. You've got to try this out. And exclusive to the Best Medicine podcast listeners, we're offering a 20% off code on Sleepy Gummies and all Soul CBD products. Just use the code TBM and make sure to let us know what you think. We've got over 6,000 5-star reviews now, and I'm proud of the quality and efficacy of our products. So go use code TBM at mysoulcbd.com and enjoy.
Yeah. I'm curious about blood sugar and food and how it affects our sleep.
Yes.
And what you have seen, because you were one of the first people to introduce me to circadian eating, right? Eating with the sun. So if it is 5 a.m. and I happen to get up that early, which I wouldn't, but it's dark out, my digestive fire is probably not ready for a big full meal yet. So I can have warm liquids, but it's not ready yet because the sun isn't up yet. And the sun is what actually allows our body to say, hey, it's time to wake up and get things going. So, and then, at night, not eating super, super late, but I don't know. I'm curious your thoughts on that because I know that blood sugar is everything. And a lot of people with blood sugar instability will wake up in the middle of the night and be hungry. And I think that's something that Mike has struggled with a little bit too. If he doesn't eat enough, maybe protein or fat before bed or a balanced meal, he sometimes feels like he's like hungry in the middle of the night.
I eat right before
Or
sleep.
he's just,
I have to.
Crazy and needs food in the middle of the night.
I have PTSD from like cutting weight during my career.
Oh, sure.
But I will not get good sleep if I'm hungry.
Yeah.
And I know, I've heard so many things about that. So I'm curious. Am I kind of like shooting myself in the foot by eating a lot right before I go to bed?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a huge topic. So we mentioned that light is the biggest impactor of our circadian rhythm. The second biggest one is temperature. And so certainly your ambient temperature and what have you, but there's also our bodily temperature based on some of the things that we're doing, including things like eating. So when we eat, our body temperature tends to go up to a certain extent. And so to bring about sleep onset, we want to be dropping our body temperature. That's the kind of cue to the body. That's time to sleep, because things are lowering. That body temperature is lowering. But if we just eat a decent amount beforehand, it does get more layered because it's kind of like the volume of the food that you're eating. So there's a difference between a huge steak and potatoes and all the things versus, some other things we can talk about. But this all goes back to what you were speaking to, that circadian rhythm. And so circadian rhythm intermittent fasting is the kind of technical term for it. But really that just means eating ideally between sunrise and sunset. This is coming out of work from Dr. Sachin Panda, the Salk Institute, decades of research into this, really exciting findings with his book called The Circadian Code is where he kind of synthesized some of his findings there. And super interesting because what he discovers is that even so, I don't want people to think, oh God, I got to do this really challenging thing of ending food super early, being really uncomfortable, what have you. Even if his is very gentle. It's looking at having 12 and 12. So kind of 12 hours of eating and 12 hours of, resting. That includes your sleep. So really within there, it shouldn't be too much of a struggle. So it's like, 7 a.m. to maybe around 7 p.m. or eating would be an example, right? But what he found in his research is that he speculates that it looks like only around 10% of us in our population are actually abiding by that, which is concerning because then it means we're eating far outside of that realm, and then having to deal with all of this digestion, which is really taxing on the body. All this blood flow goes to the stomach and heats up the body, and there's a lot of responses. And from a circadian perspective, when you eat something, it's telling the body what time it is and what to be doing when. So if we would think historically, we would have woken up probably or around with the sun and would have been active when the sun certainly was out and hunting and eating and all those things. But when the sun would set, it would really be kind of game over. And there wouldn't be much more because there's no refrigerator, there's no pantry, we're not probably eating too much later. Fire being the first kind of biohack, if you will.
I was going to say we probably ate around the fire, but then after that, we didn't stay up.
And because even before the fire, that was just, all you had was light or night. You know, so then once we had a fire, it kind of extended the days a little bit, but it's, you know, takes work and later on in history, then it would be more expensive because you have to have lanterns or a candle. So most people weren't really able to have like this 24-hour lifestyle. It'd be like super weird.
It's crazy how the invention of light changed everything. Whoever did that, who was that again?
Edison.
Thomas Edison.
Yeah, I should know that, but I didn't.
I know
that.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
he's messing all of this up, Molly. You know, where is he? We're bringing him on. Is he still around?
Yeah.
what does he have to say for himself?
Thomas, I wish he wouldn't have, because we could still be just hanging out and
Right?
the
I
fire
know,
on
very
the
like Game
fire.
of Thrones style
Yeah. No,
lighting.
I hate fake light. I want everything to be salt lamps and amber light and fire, and you know, I want to go back to those days.
Yeah.
So 12-12. I'm just trying to get
Oh,
back
sorry. Yes,
down
I
to
know.
it.
Sorry,
So
the
yeah,
tangents.
because I'm actually super curious about this
Yeah.
because I have this
Yeah.
issue. So
Yeah.
12-12
Would be the most gentle kind of
most
fast. Yep.
gentle, and then you're saying you can eat because at some point, if I'm so hungry that I can't sleep or I wake
Yeah.
up in the middle of the night, that
Yes.
can't be good either. So
Right.
maybe eat more fats and proteins and then something that satiates me, and that's fine, and kind of like finding
Yes.
that balance.
Yep. Okay. So 100% getting our diet right so that we're having that more stable blood sugar. I know you've been doing a lot of work on that, Andy.
Yeah.
And so, you know, continuous glucose monitors are really helpful in that process to kind of sort through what are some of the things that you're eating that might be spiking you or not spiking you. So get that handled because those can be responsible, those, you know, spikes and crashes for a lot of wake ups. So anyone listening that is like, oh, I fall asleep fine. It's the, you know, 2, 3, 4 in the morning and now I'm up. That can be a common reason. There's many, many reasons, but that can be one of them that we might be waking up. So stabilizing that blood sugar is an important piece. Then the other thing to remember is that we train our body when to get hungry and to what level. So we can actually train ourselves to have more of an earlier kind of front loading our intake of calories if we're looking to do that. And I would definitely make the argument that there's some benefit to that. And by the way, I used to do the exact opposite. I would like skip breakfast and really backload most of my calories be coming into the evening. And I'd say, oh, what's more social, or after work, I get the reward and I get to relax with the popcorn and the wine and all the things not to do for sleep. And so, but unbeknownst to me, I think many of us don't realize how what could feel like an innocuous act of just kind of, you know, a little bit of snack in the evening is sending a signal and a circadian kind of message that it's time to still be awake. We must need this energy for something.
Okay.
And so that's been a hack for shift workers too, to make sure they are kind of staying awake, is to eat later on. And so that kind of keeps them up as well. So to answer your question, you can start to move that a bit earlier, and it will take time because, but eventually, and people listening might say, oh, I'm not even hungry in the morning, because we probably trained ourselves to skip the breakfast piece. But if you start training yourself to have a bit more of that earlier element, then you'll start to respond in turn. And you'll start to get hungry. This can take some time though. So you can you can just easily kind of move that back by around, say, like an hour or so each day. And then over time, you're getting yourself to an earlier schedule. And I will call out that if we are hungry, really, really hungry throughout the course of the night, especially when waking up or what have you, that can be another sign that our circadian rhythm is a little out of whack, which most of us are, you know, honestly. So it can just mean going back to the drawing board, kind of moving things a bit on that earlier side. Now, when does it make sense to eat closer to bed? That, what I've seen is that can be something that we might do if we are in the process of kind of healing that glucose instability and we suspect that we might have difficulty there. So we're having something to stabilize things because we are unstable. So we have like the almond butter, we have
Sweet potatoes.
Right, exactly.
Complex carbs.
Yes. And so we might do that to get us through the night. But ideally, we want to be kind of healing whatever's going on there so that we're not having to kind of Band-Aid right before bed and now be processing that to be digesting.
Got it. That makes a ton of sense. One thing that you mentioned that I definitely wanted to circle back on was temperature.
Oh, yes.
This is a constant battle every single night with my girlfriend and I. And I do feel like, you know, men and women are different in that I want it cold as hell. I want it like Arctic freezing.
Yeah.
She wants it hot as hell. And I keep telling her, like, babe, Molly says the science, you know, we got to keep it cold. Like, I'm almost like, I don't even want this. Like, it's what we should
science.
do.
Yeah,
So
science.
I will
Hashtag.
definitely save this clip and send it to her.
Yeah.
Unless you tell me differently, then we're going to cut it out completely.
Okay, yes, right. Then we will
but
never speak of it.
Temperature. What temperature should we be
Cold
trying
as
to
balls.
sleep
Yeah,
at in our
yeah.
home or apartment or whatever?
Yeah. So I think this one's really, really important because so many of us will think, oh, it's a fine temperature. It's 73, 74, whatever. And what we seem to find for quality sleep is that it's more in the 60s range with a bit of a spectrum. So like the Sleep Foundation calls out anywhere between 60 to 67 degrees Fahrenheit. So playing in that area. Now, I do.
There you go. This is the clip that I'm going to record and save.
Yeah, exactly.
60 to 67. Okay.
60 she's
great,
like, yes.
Great.
Yeah.
I will
So-
not forget those numbers.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that all of this can be a sign of something that we want to look at too. If we are really, really running, if we're the type of people that tend to get so cold with some of those temperatures, and
Sure.
could there be something else going on? Thyroid issues, other things that might be difficulty or having some difficulty with that thermoregulation aspect, and just go deeper on that. So when we're looking at that, though, I know it can be an adjustment for some people, and we don't obviously want people like wildly uncomfortable throughout the course of the night or what have you. Want it to be frigid, but finding that kind of cool temperature to make such a big difference. I know we've talked about, these cooling mattress pads, different ones,
We
right?
all three of us here love Chili
Chili.
Sleep.
Okay, good, yeah.
Chili Sleep,
Yeah.
please
Chili
sponsor
Sleep,
this
yes.
podcast. I love my
Exactly.
chili pad. I hate traveling because I can't bring it with.
I
And I'm
know.
thinking, I'm always wondering why they haven't invented a travel one.
The
I
moment
know.
they do that would,
It's
and
gonna
we'll
be
get into
insane.
travel sleep for sure. But the moment they invent that travel, chili sleep, 8 sleep, game changer.
There's
Game
no
changer.
there's no way their marketing team hasn't thought of this, right?
for sure they've
okay,
thought of
I'm
it,
like, it can't
but-
be us who's
But the way the mechanism works of pumping the cold, fluid through it, I just don't see
they
how
have
you
to
do
be
it.
tinier, and then you have water in the hotel room, or they partner with hotels, or I don't know. Chili Sleep, figure this out because
Yes.
it's not as fun to travel when you're like, oh, where's my chili pad? But it is interesting because something I've heard is it's okay to go to bed a little cold. Obviously, like you said, you're so frigid that you can't even think. But
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm a little cold, but I always sleep better that night. I always
Yes.
realize that going to bed a little bit cold is so much better than waking up at 3 a.m. sweating and being like, oh shit, I'm so hot. So for people listening who are afraid to do this, know that it's okay to go to bed a little bit cold. Like you want your body to feel that
Yeah.
for a
100%.
moment. So I can imagine though it does take a moment to adjust to, I
Yes.
guess. I don't know, but
I
I've
think-
never wanted it warm. So
Same, I know. So, well, a couple of things for those people. One, there are programs that they can run on, say, the Chili or the 8 mattress, or some of the other ones that are, say, in the mattress itself, like a Sleep Number or what have you. So often there would be the option to have that program so that it can be a little bit warmer when you first get in, if that's important to you, and then it kind of, while you're asleep, then gets lower.
Got
But
it.
ideally, we are having that on the cooler side to kind of ebb us into sleep. But a couple other things. So one, yes, Chili is partnered with some hotels in the UK to
Nice.
have
Cool.
those chili pads on hand. So you could just kind of upgrade. And I desperately want this to happen in the US. Like I just came back from that conference and thankfully they were one of the vendors there. So they let, a bunch of us be able to use it during the conference, which was amazing to be in a hotel and have the chili pad there and just so helpful. But if anyone's listening to and saying like, okay, why do we require all these like electronics to sleep? One thing that I think is helpful is almost to think of this from a perspective of our ancestors, and what's likely is that we were sleeping outside in nature,
Yes.
probably as low to the ground and sometimes on the ground, most likely for many years, millions of years. So there was this period of time that's what life looked like, and what happens on the ground is the coolest place possible. So it's very, very cold often, certainly the coldest spot they'd have throughout the course of your entire day, in that evening on the ground. So it's almost as if we're mimicking how things were for us. There's even an argument that it could be why we have this this enjoyment of, say, like weighted blankets. Could it be that it's akin to almost like, heavy hides or things that we might have put on ourselves to warm ourselves?
weighted blankets.
Right. So
They're
between all of that, just coming back, I think it's important to have that blueprint of what we're really trying to model is how we lived when we were more connected to nature, even though it might bland as like this new fancy Jetson style of sleeping. But, you know, because if we think of how we've been sleeping in recent years, when many of us have been struggling, we're in these foam, you know, mattresses, it's insulated. You were trapping all this heat in these man-made materials. And we really weren't meant to live like that. Like it's just not something we would have done in the past. So by being trapped in that heat, that's disrupting the quality of that sleep and like nothing we really would have had in the past.
Yeah.
We got to get back into camping, you know?
Yeah.
Camping. Everybody, sleep outside naked in your backyard today so you can wake up in the morning with the sun.
Yes.
Mollie's first tip, the sun. Then you're also getting the cold temperature.
Yep.
I mean, you're already killing two birds with one
You
stone.
are. No, you
I'm going to
hit
sleep in my
on-
backyard tonight.
Yes, you hit on
You know I will.
something that I think really just is so helpful, I hope, is this one study at a University of Colorado where that's exactly what they did. They took this whole group of people camping.
I want to be part of these sleep
I
studies.
know.
How do
I
I
mean,
get
how-
to be part of these?
Yeah,
There's
where
so
do I
many.
sign
I'm
up?
like, how do you know about all these studies? Where do I want to be part of them.
This one is really cool for everything that we're speaking about. And I think you guys are really interested in, you know, just that modeling of how things were and bringing that into our day-to-day life and kind of getting it more natural. So what they did is they took everyone camping, and some of these people would identify as sort of night owls or, you know, really skewing towards a delayed sleep onset time, which just means they go to bed late. So then they start going camping. Within a relatively short period of time, we're talking about a few days, they started syncing up to this rhythm that was happening in nature. So that's called really entrainment. So entrainment is the process by which, because of our environment and our behaviors, we're circadianly entraining those rhythms, because there are many rhythms. And you mentioned, I know we have so many tangents, but you mentioned women and potentially needing more sleep. Well, something to be aware of is that there are all these biorhythms that we're trying to manage with our sleep-wake cycle. So for men and for women, we want to mind that circadian rhythm. And I keep mentioning that, but I should have defined it. And it's, you know, it's 24-hour rhythm that we operate within. And so we have that to be mindful of. But then for women, we also have to be mindful of our infradian rhythm, which is this rhythm that's happening every around 26 days or so over the course of about a month. And that's our cycle. And I'm saying that for women that have a menstruating age. But so minding that will also really dramatically affect our sleep results. And especially if we start getting out of alignment with those hormonal shifts throughout the course of our month, throughout that month, that can really be problematic if we're not working in alignment with that. So that's why these rhythms are so important. And that's where camping or something of that nature just helps get us back on track with ease, because everything just aligns.
That's so interesting. It actually gives me a lot of hope, because I am someone who's more of a night owl. I struggle with waking up in the morning.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, as we said, kind of autoimmune and other issues with that. But the fact that we're so malleable, the fact that we can adapt like that, and that study shows that, tells me, okay, just kind of get back to basics, turn off the lights, get rid of the blue light, maybe don't eat as much at night, and start to like force/train yourself to get into that better sleep schedule is kind of what you're saying.
100%. A more recent study in 2019 was one that had found that they were able to help shift the extreme, you know, night owls to a bit on an earlier schedule. And some of the things that they did was front load activities on the first half of the day. So that included that morning sunlight exposure first thing. They also paired in morning exercise. And I love what you had said too, especially if we put exercise somewhere within sunrise and sunset, that seems to be beneficial for sleep. But they happen to do it on the first half too, because it seems to help or could help with what we're trying to align, which is our wake up time being consistent, but also our cortisol pulse. So what should happen is when we first wake up, our cortisol pulse should be really at its highest, and it's almost like natural caffeine. And so it's going to get us through the day. It's a good thing. And we villainize cortisol often, but we want that. But what can happen is things can get either too high or too low based on some of the behaviors and things we're doing. So they're, you know, leveraging that, and by putting the exercise on the first half, that's another cue that it's, you know, time to take on the day. We're bringing up that body temperature, all of those things. And then with the meal timing piece as well, having the meal timing on the bit earlier side, then they were able to help these people fall asleep with more ease earlier on. But then they also found all these other cool effects like cognition improvement, grip strength, like a number of things. And
Yeah.
grip
Working
strength
on
oddly, but yeah, oddly being a really important, kind of key or predictor of all health, longevity and
Sure.
kind of all cause mortality.
Wow.
Oddly, I
Grip
know
strength?
I'm working on that one because my grip strength actually isn't that great, so that's concerning. But yeah,
I don't know how my grip is. I'm curious about, okay, so the tips of, okay, wake up, go outside,
Yeah.
get your ass outside,
Yep.
make it cold at night, whether that's with a chili pad or just your AC.
Yep.
Try to eat with the sun and your last meal. What would
Yeah.
be like a really great ideal last meal? I was doing some studying and I heard that it's like a mixture of almost like a Greek yogurt and protein, almost like you want like a slower digesting dairy protein or something. Have you heard about this?
Yeah,
Some
so
girls are drinking this before bed for blood sugar regulation.
yeah, so
interesting.
I would say that because people get really wild on this topic too, because
Yeah.
then there's like the carnivores, the
Yeah.
vegans, the this, like a lot of people have different things. So what I would at least say is that we're having those blood sugar stabilizing foods, most importantly, and certainly. I've seen some things that kind of concern me when people will say, oh, having late night oatmeal, pretzels, all of these things that tend to spike many of us and turn
Yeah.
into sugar. So I think even if people listening were to even test for 14 days to a month with the continuous glucose monitors, those would be so helpful because I think many of us just don't realize what life would look like with that stabilization. And that can happen even for, if you're vegetarian or vegan, you might be having things that tend to spike more, but you're learning those cues of what to pair things with and the timing. But that does take some time to kind of work that through.
What's a example of a wearable that you like or that people could easily order?
Yes. Okay. So wearables, I'm really passionate about because I think that what I like about these consumer grade wearables is that it is really just, I think, another way for us to become more self-aware of some of the things that we're doing but still, I have to call out too that many people can get obsessive with these things. And so we don't want to get too far on the other side. But if we feel like we have agency, if we're learning all these skills, then we can put steps in place to kind of get things working and to get things back on track. Cause we're all gonna, life's working. It's great. And then you got a bunch of travel and other things happening. And then you have a kid and a dog and whatever. And then all of a sudden things fall off, out of whack. So then we can get things back on track. Also, as we're building this baseline of all this information, I mean, it's fascinating because I have people coming through that have years and years of data and then suddenly something dips from their baseline. That's incredibly interesting. And, many kind of forward thinking sleep physicians and what have you will also agree while there's problems with consumer wearables, the breadth of information that they get from these, that can be really helpful for them as well. Yeah. So what are the ones that we might want to look into? There's a bunch of them. I personally have everyone that I'm working with right now. This could change, it's a fast changing area. There's a lot of new ones coming out, but right now Oura Ring is the one, OURA, that I have everyone wearing. And that's a really fascinating one and also helpful for women that are of menstruating age because that one does a really great job at helping us to track our cycle with the ring because of its tracking of body temperature. And they've kind of paired up with natural cycles.
I heard this,
Yeah, it's a really cool thing. So it's kind of like biohacking our rhythm, if you will.
need to get that.
Yeah, I think you would be really, really loving that. So that one, then there's, BioStrap is another great one. Whoop Band is great. There's Apple Watch. There's the Muse headband. There's the Dream headbands. Unfortunately, I found the head ones seem like there's still some work to be done because they're just a little like funky and fall off or just, it's a tricky one. However, those ones are really the only ones that might have any basis for sleep stage classification because they're looking at the brain versus the hand and wrist-based trackers, which are they're making their best guess at what sleep stage we might be in. So meaning REM, deep sleep, light sleep. So anytime people are saying like, oh, I sleep great because I get, the Oura Ring or the BioStrap, whatever tells me that I get X amount of deep sleep REM, it's likely that is not that accurate. It's kind of a, coin toss on the accuracy of that. That's the least accurate of any of the metrics on the hand and wrist-based trackers. But that doesn't mean that some of the information isn't super helpful. So what I mean by that is, if you're listening and you say that you average, 30 minutes of deep sleep, and then suddenly something happens and now you're getting an hour and a half, that's interesting because you're going outside of that baseline that's been established with that particular wearable.
Sure.
Never cross compare the wearables because they have all different algorithms and different things. But within that one wearable, if you start deviating, then that's noteworthy. So you want to see what you're doing and why that happened. But just starting to have some of that information can be really, really beneficial. And there can be times to take kind of a break from it. If you're starting to have like a nocebo effect where you're waking up every day and your stats stink and you aren't kind of in the conversation of educating around what are some of the things you could do, it might make sense for your mental health to kind of take a breather and not set your days up every day with like, oh, it's going to be a crap day because of this number. Yeah. So there's a lot of kind of psychology behind those.
Aura. I need to get the Aura. That's so cool that it matches with natural cycles because then you can learn your menstruation and your ovulation.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's really fascinating. Before we get to, before we close it out on supplements and caffeine, good old caffeine, Michael.
Yeah. I'm obsessed with
Before
caffeine.
we get to that, I feel like we've got, not being on your cell phone before you go to bed and in the morning, and the salt lamps, which everybody go get these baby salt lamps. They're so cute. They're on Amazon. They're like $5.
Yeah.
Whenever I post about them, people are like, where do I get these salt lamps?
So
and everyone
great.
will tag me, be like, I got my baby salt lamp.
Oh,
it makes your
that's
house feel like a
awesome.
spa too. It's just so nice. So we have salt lamps everywhere, and it just like makes me feel calm. It makes me feel safe. And I think that is so important before you go to bed. And I've noticed that the emotional aspect of sleep is so fascinating. You can do all the biohacks, the sun, the food, the supplements, be off my phone. But if I am stressed about something or I know I have something to do the next day that I'm really anxious about, it ruins my sleep. It's so emotional.
Yeah.
It's so emotional. Like you said with that woman who somebody passed, or it's just crazy. So I've tried to figure out, like, is it breath work? Is it getting out a piece of paper? And sometimes I'll literally just brain dump and write down, what are you stressed about right now? Like, what are you afraid is going to happen? And just get it out. And to, sometimes that helps. I mean, what are your thoughts on the emotionality of sleep? Because this is so big. And then people get in a mind F of they can't sleep. And then you're afraid you can't sleep. So you don't sleep because you're afraid you can't sleep. And then you're just like,
that was me. Sleep anxiety.
it's called sleep anxiety.
Sleep anxiety. It's a whole world of it. Yeah.
It's like when you think about it less, then you do sleep. And then you're like, rah,
yes, totally. So first off, you can sleep. So anyone listening, you really, really
replay
can
this
sleep.
at night.
Yes,
you can sleep.
You can sleep.
You can sleep.
And I think, and I was one of those people that would say, oh, well, I read of this obscure thing where someone died of sleep because they never slept. And, so
there's one girl out there.
Exactly. So, and to speak to that, there's this unfortunate kind of family line in Italy, a very small kind of family that has this very odd issue where as they get older, then they deal with this problem where some of them are not sleeping and then becomes fatal.
Wait, how long would you have to go? Fun sample fact here. If I went like 14 days right now, would I I'd go crazy.
You can't.
Would I die from like
you would go very crazy. So there's a DJ that many years back tried this as kind of like this stunt. And
it sounds fun.
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. And he started, really having a lot of psychological effects. He was seeing things. It was a mess. And so he went, it was around like the 10-day range or so. So yes, you really can't go.
Did he die?
So he was okay. They were able. They found that there's it appeared like some micro sleeping, because you start stealing sleep where you can. But so the point, I don't want to get everyone all concerned. So anyone that's listening, we're bringing it back. You can sleep. I promise. So there's the concern of that, small family in Italy or what have you. You are not that person. So just really standing in the fact that you can indeed sleep. Many people will go to sleep labs and they'll experience what's something known as paradoxical insomnia, where they think that they didn't sleep a wink, but actually on, the PSG, which is kind of the gold standard for measuring sleep, they'll see that there was sleep occurring and often a lot of it. But they'll just, unfortunately, and that's not to say that like, okay, well, so just deal with it, even though you didn't feel like you slept at all. Obviously something's not working. But I'm saying that just because many of us might have perceptional things that are going on where we think that we didn't get much sleep. Like I'm clear that what I was dealing with, that I was still getting sleep. I thought I wasn't getting like any at all,
okay.
but still squeezing out some. So point being that the body is going to really work to ensure that it gets this primal need.
Yeah.
So just first standing in that fact that you can sleep. And then, so from that place, what are some of the things you can do? So I love what you said about kind of that brain dump. One recommendation is really to take out like a piece of paper, draw a line in the middle, make 2 columns, and then, on the left-hand side, put all of the things that are coming up. And it could be no matter how small or big. I got to make that phone call. I got to do that other thing, send that email. So you write all of those. And then on the right-hand side, then you're putting what are the actions that you can take and by when. So I'll do that phone call tomorrow at 9 a.m., XYZ. Or if it's something that you actually don't, there's no action to be taken. So it's really more in the realm of acceptance. Someone's passed, or, you've gotten a divorce or what have you, practicing those things there, that acceptance of that problem that, needs to be handled. So from that place, then you have what feels like you're closing the loop on all those open loops that are going on your brain to kind of lower that hyper aroused and hyper, brain state.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. It feels like these open loops. And if I just close them, I can go to bed knowing that I wrote them down on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Because I have a fear of forgetting things because I have ADHD. So I'm always like, oh, what if I forget to do this thing? And so I write everything down, even like the stupidest thing, like take the garbage out tomorrow at 9 a.m. or like just little things that I just know that it will escape me. And that makes me feel a little bit more confident to go to sleep. It's almost like I have to give myself permission to fully brain dump it all out, like puke it out to get myself into a place where it feels safe enough to surrender to go to sleep, because sleep is such a vulnerable thing. Right. Primally, it's like you have to feel safe, and that's a different episode for a different time. But as a woman, like I hate sleeping alone. Like I'm terrified to sleep alone.
Sure.
It's so weird. I'm like, what happened in my past life? I was like attacked during the night or something. Where I'm like, no, what if someone comes and captures me?
Yeah.
It's such a safety game. Like you have to feel calm and safe. And this is why I think people sleep so well on vacation, because it's like, oh, I'm not working, I'm good, life's good. You saw the sun, you saw the beach, you weren't on your phone as much. Like vacation is the optimal time to sleep well, because you're doing a lot of these things we talked about today.
Exactly.
So of course you sleep well on vacation because like I don't have work tomorrow. I saw the sun today. Like you're just chilling.
Yeah. I think anxiety can be a massive factor with that. I
huge.
And shameless plug, like CBD is
Yes, 100%.
an incredible way. Like
Such an important
it's such an
possibility.
important aspect in sleep. I would say, as I kind of mentioned earlier, is one of the number one pain points that we address at Soul and that we hear from. And it's just so fascinating. I mean, we know that CBD, when it's affecting the endocannabinoid system, it can help with homeostasis in the nervous system, which is kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about homeostasis here. And so that's why it's so cool to see CBD and other supplements help with sleep too. And what I personally love about CBD, and once again, I'm not a doctor, but I've been down that route like you, a prescription medication. There's so many side effects. And there's a place and time for it. I always say I don't want to demonize it, because in acute situations, it can be life-saving, it can really help you. But for me, there were so many side effects with it. I was on Ambien. I was on lorazepam, like anti-anxiety meds that help me sleep. And CBD, amongst many other things, kind of showed me that, like, wow, there's low risk, high reward solutions here, right? And so I'm super curious to some of those low risk, high reward solutions with supplements that you kind of lean into.
Yeah, 100%. So one, I so appreciate you sharing all that, because so many people can relate to that or have considered going down that path. And I think one thing I didn't mention is that what has now been deemed the first line, kind of action if we are dealing with our sleep is CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. So, ensuring that if anyone is listening and they want some support on those thoughts that they're dealing with, or just feel like, no, I absolutely can't sleep. That's kind of the first step to be taking, and a really high, efficacy ranking with that. But also in a relatively short period of time. Most of them in most of these studies really effective within around 6 weeks. So really getting ourselves back on track with that and addressing our thoughts that are coming up and a number of things. It's a whole kind of practice, but there are things that we can certainly do that I think in the past weren't thrown out as much from doctors. And we do have to remember that if you're going to your primary care doctor, even out of Harvard, the average amount of time that general practitioners are learning about sleep in their training is around 2 hours. And that's even at Harvard Medical. So
isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I mean, even nutrition is about, I think, 20 hours in their total. So like sleep and nutrition, why is that not at the forefront of all of this? I mean, that's a wild statistic.
It's wild. Yeah, that one really gets me going because it's just so frustrating.
Pisses Mollie off.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. And those are kind of and nothing against, these doctors. I'm sure they would, love, especially it's such a fascinating area, I think. I mean, I'm biased, but, I think that they would be fascinated. They would have so much more, be armed with this information when they're dealing with patients and know to go to these things or to quickly refer them to the people that, you are at risk for sleep apnea, which we haven't even discussed. But definitely if you have any signs of sleep apnea or just are, waking up multiple times throughout the course of the night or, our mouth breathing, all these other things that you absolutely want to get that handled. And these doctors could be the gateway to that and, referring them. And unfortunately, they often don't know what to look for and aren't even in that conversation. But as us, the person that's struggling, we go to the person with the white coat and assume that they would be catching these things, but they haven't unfortunately been trained.
But you have to do what you did, which is take your health into your own hands. Yes. Right. And so, and that's why things like your podcast and your courses, it's incredible that people can start to get results when they feel like traditional medicine failed them. And I feel like a broken record, but that's how I felt for years and years, is that, people in white coats, unfortunately, not because they were, had ill intent, but it failed me until I started learning about more of the options.
So important.
Real quick, sleep apnea, because I know what it is. I've heard of it a few times. I don't think I have it. Obviously, I feel like I would know if I have it, right? But then I went to the dentist last week and she said that because I never got an expander when I was younger, she thinks that my mouth's a little like narrow, like small for my tongue. Yeah. And so she just said maybe. She's like, "Oh, you can go home and take this test." She's gonna let me take home this sleep apnea test.
Great. Yes.
For like $300. I'm like, is it worth taking to see?
Yes.
Because she's like, do you know if you nasal breathe or mouth breathe at night? And I said, I think I nasal. I think I'm pretty cognizant of it because I've like trained my system to do that more.
Great.
But I probably intermittently also open my mouth and I'm breathing through my mouth, which is not good. Yeah. So how would someone know if they have sleep apnea? Can the Oura Ring tell us this? And then for people listening who are like kind of laughing at this whole mouth tape thing because I think it's crazy, is it legit? Should we actually be like closing our mouth at night? Because it's like if you're snoring, that's not good, right? I don't snore, but...
And what is sleep apnea?
Yeah.
Really? I've heard the term a million times.
I know. I'm afraid to take this test. I'm like, what if I have it? And she's like, oh, well, maybe you need a mouth expander because then if I expand this, my passageway will be bigger.
Yes.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I might have to get a friggin' expander in my mouth. I'm gonna look like such a nerd. Like, hey guys, hey! I'm gonna look so sexy.
Oh my gosh.
I can't wait.
I would say that out of everything we're talking about, this is the area that people often in a relatively short period of time, and does depend on the severity of the sleep apnea. This is the one where it's like life is different when you address this. I mean, all of obviously sleep in general, but this is the one that if this has been undiagnosed and you discover this and then you treat this, it's like the colors are brighter, just like everything kind of changes. And why is that? To more define it, it's these apnea-like events. So the difficulty in breathing while you're sleeping. So obviously we're talking about we want to feel safe, we want to feel at ease, all these things while we're sleeping. I mean, what is more disruptive and stressful than to feel like you're kind of choking all the time? And I don't want to make it so dramatic because I think many people are missing this and don't feel like they have signs for this, or they wouldn't, maybe they're saying, well, I'm not overweight, I'm not snoring, a ton or what have you, and might not even consider that they might have other versions of, more of a mild sleep apnea. So it goes into categories: mild, moderate, severe. There can be upper airway resistance syndrome. So there's different kind of buckets that you might fall into. And if you get this expansion, you and Blake are going to be twins, because he actually has, and this was discovered from an at-home test.
Okay, so I should do this.
You should
It's
definitely
worth
do
it?
this.
Okay.
I believe that all of us should do this. And I really think, so there's one test that I really like called Sleep Image. It's a ring, but testing, just absolutely test. But this ring I really like in particular because it has this ease of use. It will FDA cleared to diagnose you for sleep apnea, but it also pulls in more HRV information, so you get some sleep quality information. But you might change throughout the course of your life. So imagine if all of us were to be tested with this, even kids, because, we can see this for kids as well. So you test that at one stage in your life, but you can develop apnea over a course of the time based on hormonal changes. Things like TRT and other things can actually put you more at risk for having more apnea-like events. I mean, there's just a number of things, and of course, weight gain and some of the things that we might know. But behaviors can up your amount of apnea. So even just eating late can make you more, if you have an inclination for some apneas and you are likely to have more apneas. Certainly alcohol is a big one. But Blake's was diagnosed as REM dependent sleep apnea. So he's not a snorer, he's not a this, not that. But when he goes into REM, which is in the early morning hours, then he tends to have more of these light apneas. And so his recommendation from also a dentist over here was to get the expansion, Vivos being one of the brands that will expand the palate.
Okay, I'm gonna have to talk to him about this.
And what does he notice? Has he already noticed an improvement?
He's going through the process of, because it's a long,
he's in it.
Depending on the how much they need to be expanded, can take many months to go through
But
that.
it's about the sizing of his jaw. Same thing.
Because you're not breathing. When we say apnea, it's because there's not enough air coming in and out.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
like my throat's not enough oxygen. Wait,
And-
my
But I
nostrils,
And there can be
right?
different reasons. So then it can be more nose related for
Right.
some. There can be more the throat size for others. It can be the muscles in the tongue.
Yeah,
So
I think it's my tongue.
there's a lot.
And Mike has a broken nose too from boxing, so
yeah,
he
I broke
definitely
my
has
nose a
some
few
apneas
times.
during sleeping. Yeah, he's definitely
Yes.
getting constricted airway because if it's through the nose, then he's
Right.
not be able to.
Right.
I'm trying to think of anatomy right
which
now.
I don't really
Yeah.
know how to cure other than I think I have a deviated septum. Maybe getting a nose job.
So,
Oh, okay. In
okay.
today's
Maybe, and you know what?
episode-
Maybe a little
today's
Botox
episode-
while I'm in there.
In today's episode, Mike
Let's
needs
do
a
a light
nose
touch.
job.
Nose job.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's really the
No, but
real
seriously,
takeaway.
You get
I
a
broke
nose
my
job, I'll
nose
get an expander.
3-4 times.
Okay. Well, a
So he
couple things.
definitely has some limited
So-
airway, right?
Which I
Yes.
feel like a lot of
So,
people have broken their noses.
A lot of people listening probably have some nose issues, broken their nose, et cetera, et cetera. So my hope is that that curiosity on this topic has us start to actually take advantage of some of these professionals that can be so helpful for this. You go to an ear, nose, and throat doctor. You go to an airway trained dentist. It sounds like your dentist is really trained in
she's
this
very
conversation.
holistic. She's great.
Sure.
Okay.
So we take some of those steps so then we can isolate what's going on and then decide, what's the severity? Do we need to have surgery? Other things you can do. There's a company called Airway Stints that you basically put up a stint into your nose. It sounds ridiculous, but put up a stint into your nose and then it expands. And then that helps be able to create the space for you to breathe throughout the course of the night. There's magnetic ones that are a bit more kind of consumer grade. You could order them, online. So of course you've probably seen the breathe right strips, but there's one that has magnets basically, and it really does measurably expand.
So do
the
those
nose.
work?
Those are surprising. Those are really, they'll change even the face
magnets?
of your nose. It would just really make them
Yeah.
expand. So it's worth testing
What about
those.
just the paper? If you walk into CVS or Walgreens, are those doing anything?
Those some can be helpful, and I hope
Okay.
I'm not for anyone listening. We never, if you have sleep apnea, would want to just get some of these things. We'd want to really deal with this because
Yeah.
it might require. In the interim, though, can be the CPAP, but many of these things that we would do that get to the root of it, like the palate expansion, there's surgery for really intense things that might be really difficult. And then there's also daytime treatments. There's things there's almost a TENS unit for the tongue that you do during the day to strengthen the tongue.
Yeah,
Ooh.
yeah, great.
Yeah,
That
all
sounds fun.
I know.
All
She
kinds of
scared the
things,
shit
right?
out of me. She's like, Has anyone ever told you this? I'm like, no.
No, but I think that's a cool place to start, though, Molly, is essentially an
Just being aware of
ENT
it.
doctor or, what are there any other ways to make sure it's like, okay, I need to go check if I have sleep apnea. Where do I go? What do I do?
Yes. Okay. So a couple other things. And also, Angie, for ADHD, sleep apnea and ADHD have huge links
I know.
together.
That's what was crazy that she brought that up because I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm having limited oxygen while I'm sleeping. I don't know. I thought because I don't snore, I'm fine.
Yeah, I went to this event at Stanford and it was, with a sleep specialist, and they were kind of sounding the alarm, particularly for slender women in their into 30s, into 40s, as being this kind
That's not you, Angie.
Yes.
Just kidding. Just kidding. That was such a layup. That was a layup. Sorry.
It's not you, Angie. So you're fine.
That ain't you.
Okay, good.
You don't have that problem.
Hey, as long as I don't have sleep apnea, I'm
You don't
good.
have to listen to this part.
Exactly.
No. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Oh my god!
Okay.
Oh my god! I'm like, I'm gonna take the sleep apnea test then.
You got to take it. Yeah.
But then there's
totally
also
take
a
it.
ring.
Yeah, there's also a ring. So
Okay.
there's
So sorry,
different ways
I
to
interrupted.
test.
Go
No,
ahead.
totally. I mean, and that's what's so important too, because some of us might have preconceived notions of what we might think sleep apnea looks like, or it's just some, but it's really can be something that can be affecting many of us. Or if it's not actual apnea, then it might be the upper airway resistance syndrome that I was mentioning too.
Yeah.
And so there. And to also answer your other question from before about the mouth tape, then that can be really helpful for some of us. But if we are dealing with apneas, sometimes that can make it worse. So you do want to be careful and really be thorough in that whole process. And then the other thing is there are people that you can go to that are more airway specialists that can help support you with even exercises you do. So actually, this is something that I'm dealing with. So there's something called a tongue tie.
Yeah.
So I have a tongue tie. So I'm going to do some content on getting this cut.
Oh, it wasn't cut when you were a baby?
It wasn't cut when I was a baby. So I'm going to do the content
now
on
it's
that.
popular to cut it.
Now it's
when you have your baby. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So this is super important for parents with young kids because that can affect sleep. But they can also affect how the face shape is. So this gets really layered, and I know it's way off topic, but so there's things that you want to make sure that you're not missing that might be in the way of getting great sleep each night.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then, you do some of this work on the front hand. You go to some of these professionals, you ensure that you're being screened for these things, and then you take the steps necessary. But then on the other side, you're gaining this experience of life where you're like waking up rested. You're being able to, hit it at the day, do all the things you got to do that you might not have been able to do if you were sleep deprived night after night, which I really strongly believe so many of us are. And I think it's more of a rarity now to be a well-rested individual in this society right now.
Wow, I'll keep you guys posted. I'm gonna take this sleep apnea test.
Oh,
and
I'm
then
excited.
I'll go from there and see if it's. I need to go to the orthodontist too. She said.
Okay.
To see if they'll confirm. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah. And there
Wow.
are cases and places when it makes sense to go in lab if there's other kind of concerns, or we want to look at sleep staging. And because this is really going to be testing the breath. It's more like a respiratory, element. So it's seeing, are you having difficulty with that throughout the course of the night? Is that affecting other things, heart rate, et cetera? Whereas sleep lab, there's a time and a place for that. If there's other things, TBI or other issues at play, that you want to look at the actual brain waves.
Wow, this is going to be a two-parter. I already know it is. We're going to break this into two because it's so good. But we got to close it out on your top 3 favorite sleep supplements. If someone's like, okay, what would you take? What do you think is helpful? And then how to work with caffeine. I'm going to say it that way because I know most people listening probably do love caffeine.
Yeah.
I cut it out. It was such a great choice for me and my anxiety and my body.
Yeah.
But I do know most people like coffee or like caffeine. So how do they play with that? Because that's under the umbrella of supplementation, and what you drink in the morning does affect. I mean, if I drink coffee, I do notice it affects my sleep that night. So for some people, it does last in their body a long time. So I am curious what your favorites are if you had to choose, and then how to dance with caffeine or how to work with it, I should say, right? Because I don't know who's going to go cold turkey necessarily always.
Yeah, 100%. So a couple of things. One, I think I alluded to this topic of chronobiology, the science of time, and how time affects your biology. Well, there's an entire underneath that umbrella, chronopharmacology, so the timing of your drugs, and so how that impacts
Time those drugs, y'all.
Time those drugs, exactly, and which include the most common of drugs being things like alcohol, alcohol and caffeine, two of the big heavy hitters, and then THC and other things too. But so out of that, to address the caffeine piece first, that one certainly as a stimulant, there's different, we can even be tested to see are you short, like a slow metabolizer or fast metabolizer. So you can get those tests with genetic testing and kind of see where you fall. But yes, I think a couple of things. One, depending on if you are that slow metabolizer, particularly because then that takes you longer to kind of expel that caffeine, then for you, you might want to be more mindful to move that earlier on into the day, having a lower amount of caffeine. And yes, there are a lot of benefits that we do find from caffeine in particular, way for focus, what have you. But then I think many of us might be missing some of the anxiety-like effects and other things and physiological effects. I happen to be testing this new ingredient from a friend of mine, Sean Wells. I don't know if you guys know him, right? He's testing something called pyroxanthine, and it's basically the downstream effect of caffeine. So that's to be continued. Could be an interesting one. But so that you're not having as much of the physiological effects.
Nice.
But with coffee, for traditional coffee, then yes, regulating that more to earlier. Can you kind of cut it with other alternatives? Often if you do like the mud water, dandy blends, the Four Sigmatics, and then at least kind of have a half and half so you still feel like you have that ritual.
Like titrating down a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Is there a time that you should stop drinking coffee?
Yeah. So again, there is that range because some of the fast
Right.
metabolizers can get away with going a little bit later, but I would say for most people, calling out like 2 p.m. being the latest. And granted, I know I'm doing generalizations. Are you a later one?
I'm later.
Later,
and
yeah.
it's wild. I
You
could
go past 2?
You know me and Clay. I could drink coffee at 8 o'clock at night,
Yeah.
even after dinner,
Sure.
and I'll be in bed, no problem.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's not a good thing, even though
Yeah.
I can fall asleep, right?
Yeah. So a couple of things with that. So depending on if you are that fast metabolizer, you might be, more speedy than most and not have difficulty falling asleep. But yes, the quality of that sleep is likely shifting. And then there could be some other effects of like what's the depth of sleep that you're getting into and some more problems there. But so playing with that, moving that a bit earlier. But I think, what also is important is for all the drug piece, if we have some of these other things in place, then often you might be a little, so for some people, they might not be as impacted by caffeine. So I don't want to make it as,
Sure.
like a warning sign, because sometimes there's things that are way bigger that we're not addressing of like the consistent sleep time and what have you. They might think of that as like the only thing.
The
only
sun,
culprit,
circadian
yeah.
rhythm.
Yeah, exactly.
The
The
basics.
temperature piece, the breath piece, stress management, all of those things. But yes, I think unfortunately caffeine can, if you are already running a little anxious, a sympathetic dominant person, then you throw what some people refer to as like a liquid cortisol or what have you, caffeine onto that situation.
Yeah.
Then you might see things like heart rate variability, dipping, and kind of what could be indicators that you are having difficulty recovering, both mentally, physically. So that could be an area that if you're struggling, it's an easy thing to play with and lowering that quantity.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And then those supplements
Yeah.
that Angie mentioned,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Yeah.
100%.
Favorites.
I
Super
know.
curious.
So one, Soul is something that, we had you guys on the podcast to speak about CBD in particular. And CBD is really an exciting one because it does seem to have a lot of benefits without some of the concerns that we might see with plain THC.
Yeah.
So THC having the ability to help with sleep onset, but then are there some concerns of the type of sleep that we're getting?
Right.
Whereas CBD seems to have much more promise as having a lot of positive effects for both sleep, but also the anxiety that we're dealing with, and even using that throughout the course of the day, manage that anxiety. So then you're not like putting, CBD onto this already stressed person. So hopefully you can manage that throughout the day, and then that further supports sleep at night. So I would say that CBD absolutely has a fantastic place in the evening that can be really helpful. And then I would also say for just a high safety profile, things like magnesium for most people,
Love
right?
magnesium.
I mean, just so many of us are deficient in one particular way, or, the more stress we get, kind of depleting our magnesium reserves. So, getting some of that magnesium can be really helpful. Some of the CBD can be helpful. If you want more heavy hitters at certain times, Things like GABA could be something that you could throw in, but I would recommend not having that every day because it's kind of in the same world that is being impacted by things like benzos and hypnotics. So just, maybe not making that a nighttime, a nightly thing, but every so often if you're really struggling. And then things like glycine, all of these are, glycine would be one that's a bit more safe to do consistently and also seems to help with thermoregulation and kind of that dipping of our body temperature throughout the course of the night. And then melatonin is such a popular one. And there's a lot of schools of thought on that. We're actually going to have one of the big speakers that speaks to like high dosing of melatonin.
Yeah.
So we'll, hear
it's
that.
a master antioxidant.
It's even cancer fighting at high doses,
yeah,
right?
So there is
a lot of studies.
There are interesting studies around cancer. Got a lot of press around COVID, and so different call outs about the efficacy of high dosing of melatonin. Now, the other camp is more on this is also a hormone, and you want to be mindful of any hormone supplementation that you're taking, and could that then affect the body's ability to make its own? So that's still a big debate. I tend to be in the more kind of cautious realm of just, how can we naturally support making our own melatonin? But it can also, I could say, I think both camps can agree that there can be benefits for using melatonin for jet lag. This is all for like a healthy sleeper, but there's different sleep disorders.
Sure.
There's, dozens and dozens of sleep disorders that sometimes can be helped with things like melatonin. So there is a time and a place for all these things. And also there can be some recommendations for, as we age, some people will call out having that as you kind of in the elderly population and other times that can make sense. So those would be some of the most, recommended and called out. And then, but with the variance of what is safe to take daily and what might not be. Yeah. But I think I fear that so many of us, and I was one of these people too, it was like, give me the drugs without blending them in. Like, I think you guys have been so great at showing all the things that you do in alignment with these different supplements that we might take because, and really just coming at it from a healthy lifestyle perspective and learning and having this be a skill set.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole reason for this podcast too, is that we never say one thing there's many pieces of the puzzle basically. Right. And so that's what I love about this conversation. It's about getting back to the basics. It's not about just melatonin or just CBD or just blue light blocking. It's all these things together with health and wellness. So I mean, that's why we started the show, and that's why we were so excited to have you on because
this is good.
I'm so happy to be
I hope
here.
everyone geeked out. If you need to replay this episode, do it. If you need to pause, come back, take notes. This is one of those I call the geeking out episodes where you just like, for a lot of people, it's like, holy shit. But it's one of those that you can replay and come back to. And like sleep apnea, you guys, isn't something I even thought about up until last week when I went to the dentist. And she was like, hey, you should just take it. It couldn't hurt to see. And this is something we should look into. And I'm a really healthy person. And so it's like, it can't hurt to get the Oura Ring or take some of these tests and just have more body awareness. I mean, having awareness of your body and how it works is the most powerful thing we can do in this lifetime, right? And the more awareness you have around your body, the better it is. Even when it comes to supplements, some people love melatonin. They have found it to be so helpful. Some people like me, I'm pretty sensitive to it. So I can do it maybe once or twice a week, but I wouldn't know that until I had that curiosity and that awareness around my own body and how it responds to stuff. So
I want you two to let people know where they can find you. And then I'm curious, do you have anything coming up you're excited about?
Oh, wait, we got to ask her the question.
Oh my God.
What's the
So
question?
listen, this great call. I don't know how we just dove right in. All right. So you want me to take over?
All right, go for it.
All right. So we're calling the podcast The Best Medicine.
Oh, I
and
love that.
the idea is everybody, has a different idea of what the best medicine is, and what's so interesting is often when we've interviewed people and they're experts in certain areas, and then at the end of the show, we ask them what's the best medicine. Yeah. So often it's not even what they talked about, which is fun. And so, for Angie, laughter, I think, is the best medicine, for example. And there's so many different reasons of why it is. It can be for spiritual, for health, or whatever. But the first thing kind of you think of when we ask, what do you think is the best medicine? What is, I guess, the first thing that kind of pops in your mind?
Well, I know, and I hate to be the one that is like so in alignment with exactly what I've been talking about all this time, but I truly believe with every fiber of my being that sleep is the best medicine. I just do. And the reason I do is that I think there are so many things that are aided when we get that great sleep that support any other thing that we find to be super important. So the laughter element, 110%, that ability to emotionally regulate, we know is derived from that quality of sleep that we're getting each night. And so to be able to show up as like the fun-loving person that you guys both are is likely aided by your emphasis on things like this, including sleep. So for me, I'm very passionate about sleep from certainly like a feel-good place. I often feel like addicted to how I feel now, to feeling good. I never thought that was really possible for me. I used to wake up with headaches and, just slugging through survival mode. And I thought that was just like how life would be for me, having no idea that you could actually see a whole other vantage point. But for me, I'm really passionate also from the mental health perspective, because like I shared, I thought I was losing my mind when I didn't have that sleep for that period of time. And I also had known myself to be someone that would, throughout most of my life, to have these periods of like, oh, I feel down, I feel this, or these like heaviness periods. And now looking back on it, seeing all those things that I just had no idea that I was doing, I'm really, really passionate about getting that message out. And it involves many of the other things we've spoken to that you wouldn't think of being connected with sleep, like the blood sugar stability. I was a roller coaster. I had no idea for most of my life. But you stabilize that helps stabilize your sleep. And all these things are bi-directional, and that will help. So we also often will call it the Trojan horse effect. So by really focusing on prioritizing that sleep, the odd thing is, in order to get great sleep, it behooves you to have a great life. Because we're getting ourselves outside, we're being active, we're dealing with things that might be stressing us, have that important conversation you need to have, or whatever you got to do, handle your finances, your this, your that, whatever might be really stressors. You really have to deal with those things in order to get that great sleep night after night for, the rest of your life. So that would be mine.
Well, I think you're an incredible example of turning your pain into a gift. And I think that's really cool. And I think you definitely should realize that you being so passionate about this is helping so many people. And I'm always inspired by people like that. So it's really cool.
Well, thank you for saying that. And, I got to somehow find some like really ridiculous examples of how like bad off I was during that period. I need to see if there's like pictures or something. Because it just, during that time, I thought there was no silver lining, that there's nothing possibly good that could come out of this. And yet, so if anyone, and maybe you're not like, maybe it's not an extreme thing, maybe you're like, oh, I just kind of sleep okay. But wherever you might fall, I hope that there's that takeaway that all of us can improve upon this area and hopefully have fun in the process and like, playing and experimenting with things. So that's really one of the things that I enjoy about it, because it's like an N=1 for ourselves, but also learning what can work for all of us and get this conversation going, because the more we talk about it, the more we can laugh and baby grandma and all the things. And then everyone's kind of in this dialogue versus many of us might think of it as an afterthought.
Amen. Wow, this was great.
This is awesome.
I can't wait to go to sleep tonight.
Yes,
I'm going to crush it.
Where, I'm sure we'll throw it in the show notes, but where can people find you? I know you have so many resources.
So the Sleep is a Skill. So sleepisaskill.com. And at sleepisaskill.com, you can do lots of different things. So one, you can take a sleep assessment, and that will give you kind of targeted information back and resources and things that you can do to improve your sleep. I think you guys might even be one of our episodes that are coming out if they're looking for different supplements or whatever. Right. So that will give you some information about what you can do for your sleep first thing. That can also sign you up for our weekly sleep newsletter, which we are nuts about. So we've done it for over 4 years. Every Monday it goes out. Sleep Obsessions. We aim for it to be the most obsessive sleep newsletter on the planet. Like really get amped about that one. So signing up for that, we put like screenshots of Oura Ring and Whoop and whatever all in there. And then we have a weekly podcast called Sleep is a Skill podcast. So you can also learn from different experts in all kinds of areas around sleep. And then we also, if that's still like not doing it for you and you want more kind of hands-on things, we have a 10-week-long program where it is required to have an Oura Ring to participate in these programs. And so from that place, so we can know where things have been, where you're at now, and where you want to go. So that's that 10-week program. We have group programs. So that's what we do with most people. And then for some people that want to do more in-depth, then we do have one-on-one options. But most people really learn a lot from each other too. So we get to see, well, how's Angie sleeping? Like what's happening there? And then how's Mike sleeping? Oh, okay. Mike started this. Oh my God, Angie just got her sleep apnea diagnosis. Okay. So what are we going to do? Like,
dude, that's the coolest club ever. Oh, Cheryl, how's your sleep? Oh, cool.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, I love CBD too. Oh, cool. Okay.
Pretty accurate.
So dorky, and I love it.
Yes, exactly.
It's so great.
That's pretty much what's going on over there.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're the best. I can't wait. I'm going to finally get the Oura Ring and take this stupid sleep apnea test. So
And
if
I
I
have
get
no
the results
affiliation
back,
with any of these things, but
if I have it, I'm going to be like, Molly, what do I do?
Okay, we'll talk about that.
It's going to be a lot, but awareness is key, right? So
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Awesome, y'all. We hope you loved this. If so,
Yay.
let us know on Instagram. Hit up Molly for any of your sleep questions, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.
Thanks, Molly.
Awesome. Thank you guys.